and welcome back finally once again to Biscuits and Gravy. It's a new year, we're finally here again to talk again about Les Miserables and our favorite songs from the musical. Today we're going to be talking about Bring Him Home, which is my second favorite song. I don't know where it landed on your ranking.
It's always changing. It's in the top 5 for me.
Is it in the top 5? I thought it wasn't in the... I think it's in the top 10. I don't think it's in the top 5. But yes, it's my second favorite, definitely by far my favorite solo in the show. What's my favorite? You'll find that out later. But yes, we'll talk a little bit my thoughts about this song. I'm very full of pizza and very sleepy, but hopefully it will still come out good. So the background to this song, something I've told you a little bit about before, but it's actually very interesting. It was one of the last songs in the show to be finalized. It was like, the show premiered in October and it was like September and they still hadn't fully figured out yet, because at some point during the process of when they adapted Les Miserables, the musical, from French to English, they decided, let's give Valjean a song for during the middle of the night at the barricade. And then they said, we got Cole Wilkinson playing Valjean, so let's write a song specifically for his range, so that's why it's very high. Herbert Kretzmer, the lyricist for the English translation of Les Mis, he was having some trouble with it because the melody that he had been given was this very high, peaceful melody that didn't go with the mood he was going for, because I think the attitude they wanted Valjean to have in the song was one of resentment towards Marius, like, how dare you come in and try to take my daughter away from me, but it just wasn't meshing with this melody that he had been given. So it was like 2:30 in the, it was around midnight, it wasn't 2:30 in the morning, or is that in my notes here? Yeah, around 2 a.m. He was talking with like the co-directors for the show, and as they were leaving, one of them made the comment that it sounds like a prayer. So this blew Herbert Kretzmer's mind, and he completely rethought how he wanted to do the song, and he decided to instead explore a dimension of Valjean that we don't really see within the book, and don't entirely see elsewhere in the musical, where he actually decides that he kind of cares for Marius and he does want him to survive. So he finished it about 5 in the morning, I think, what was it, 17 days before the show opened.
Just enough time to rehearse.
Just enough time for Cole Wilkinson to nail the song, because of course he did. But yeah, so this song serves a very interesting purpose within the show, I think, because, like I said, this is something that is not in the book. Whereas in the book, Valjean and Marius never really come to like each other, except in like the last moments of Valjean's life. And although Valjean does save Marius from death, he never really reaches the point where he's happy about it. He's never really on his side. He's just doing it out of his love for Cosette and out of a kind of a moral obligation. So I think it's very interesting that this song exists to add a new dimension to Valjean's character, which was not there previously, although I think it's still in character for him because he is a very selfless and, you know, sacrificial and giving person who could come to relate to Marius.
I like to think of it how, like Veronica said, this song is not, the depiction of Valjean in this mood, or with this kind of an attitude toward Marius, is nowhere in the book. And even at the end of his life, there's not really a reconciliation. There's just kind of a coming to terms. It's, okay, you're going to be my daughter's husband. You are my daughter's husband. You have my blessing. You know, take care of her. I'm going to go die. And what's interesting in the play is that they use a variation, not really even a variation. It's the theme of Bring Him Home in his death song. Yes,
although that's kind of before Marius gets there. So kind of the way that I interpret that is when Valjean sings it again in his death, he's singing "Bring Me Home," and it doesn't really have anything to do with Marius.
But I find an interesting connection, though, with the use of that theme and the melody in those two places. Yeah. And thinking more about the song and how, you know, it's not in the book, it's in the play, and how does it work, and what does it really mean? What I find fascinating is the way these composers have taken this huge book and packed it into a nice
2.5 hour long
respectable play with a musical. And it's sort of like, I'm thinking of this image of taking, you know, how do you take 10 pounds of stuff and pack it into a 5-pound bag? You can't do that unless you change what you're trying to get in the bag. So I got to thinking of, you know, water. Water weighs about 1 gallon of water weighs 8 pounds.
Really?
It's pretty heavy.
That explains why those soda syrup boxes at work are so heavy.
Yeah, that's why those 5-gallon things we used to buy are heavy. They're 45 pounds. Okay, so, or 40 pounds. So the point is, how do you get a gallon of water, say, into a smaller container? And if it's frozen, if it's ice, it's going to take up the same space, maybe even a little more because it expands. But if you were to boil the water and capture it as vapor, you can put it in a smaller vessel.
Yes.
And that's kind of what they've done. They've taken this man Valjean, this huge character, and they haven't changed his essence. He's still Valjean, but they've managed to reform him, reshape him, especially in this song, into a tiny little space in the story.
Yeah.
And they bring a lot to, to the audience to understand, especially if you've read the book and you go, how does this fit? Well, in the book, he sits there all night, kind of in silence.
Complete silence.
Complete silence. It's like, so that's a meditative aspect. What's he thinking about? What's going through his head? I mean, he goes to the barricade. We don't really know why.
It is to save Marius.
He's going to save Marius, I guess, because he loves Cosette and he doesn't want her heartbroken if her lover dies. And he goes there to save him.
I think he does feel some sense of obligation to Marius.
Yeah, but he doesn't like him because when he's carrying him through the sewers and they tell the story of his thoughts, he's...
it says at one point he stops to rest for a second. He's laid Marius down. He just went through this huge quagmire where he literally had to lift Marius up over his head and he was almost drowning, but he got him through it. So he just risked his life to save this man. He lays him down. And it's Victor Hugo says he looked at him with an expression of profound hatred. And maybe it's because he just went through that quagmire. He's like, I did all this for you.
Right, and it's a different kind of hatred. I know that's the term he used, but Valjean is clearly a man of virtue and dignity and respect. And even with Javert, he never had any disdain for him, and he was more of a rival.
Yeah.
It's funny because Marius is, he's not a rival, he's just like,
I feel like Valjean would view him as a rival for Cosette.
In a way,
because again, obviously Valjean doesn't want to marry Cosette. Victor Hugo mentions in the book how since Cosette was kind of the only woman in his life, in some way he loved her in the way you would love a wife, obviously not in a sexual way or anything like that, or even a romantic way necessarily. He just, I think, felt some of the same responsibility that a husband feels towards his wife. He kind of loved her as a mother, sister, wife, and daughter all rolled up into one.
Maybe in a way he's jealous of Marius.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay, so he does have this disdain for him, and I think we can safely say that he loves Marius, but he doesn't like him.
Yes.
Because he loves everyone, he doesn't wish anything bad on anybody. Even if he hated him, maybe he hated to have to drag him through the sewer.
Yeah.
But, so anyway, we have all this going on in Valjean's mind, and it takes pages and pages and pages in the book to tell. And then it connects it to the scene of his death. And, I mean, the musical theme is connected. And I find that very interesting. This is the way the authors have taken, this gallon of water that weighs 8 pounds and only fits in a gallon jug, and they've made it into steam so they can get it into a smaller little vessel. In fact, steam is more potent, dangerous, and violent, and everything else. It has a whole different set of properties than just water.
Yes.
And that's what it is, and that's how they're giving Valjean to us in the way that they have written this song and kind of packaged all these thoughts and things that there's no way they could get him into the story. So they made it in a song. It is prayerful because he is praying when he's going through the sewer. So they captured a lot of elements that are very interesting about Valjean. Yeah,
I think it's interesting how just adaptation can do that. How you can take a source material, even when I find it amazing that Les Miserables is a book which is so long, which has so much stuff to it, and yet somehow they found a way to add to it. In this 2.5 hour long show, they added something to Valjean as a character by giving him this song, and I think it's a good thing. It really shows, obviously, the incredible talent of everyone involved in this show. Musically, we didn't have a whole lot to say about the actual instrumental music. Obviously, the tune is breathtakingly beautiful. As co-director John Caird stated when he was talking to Herbert Kretzmer, it does indeed sound like prayer. It has the harp lending it that heavenly quality. Opening, I think we get it at the beginning and end of the song, kind of a nice little book into it there. The strings are also very prominent throughout. Strings are, I think, generally used as a very sentimental instrument, and obviously with how deeply personal this song is, their use is very appropriate.
Yeah, strings are one of those things that they're like sinew and bone, because there's the wood in the strings and the bow. And if you didn't know, in the movie Psycho,
Oh yes, it's only a string.
it's all the music is string instruments.
Yes,
there's no winds, there's no percussion, there's no brass or anything. So the strings are one of the more visceral sounding instruments, and they use them to great effect with crescendos and accents and all those other elements. But what I find really interesting is that when he sings near the end, near the very end, he says, "If I die, let me die," and there's a great crescendo of his voice and the lifting of the orchestra, and
If I die,
it's very strongly held up by big brass overtones. And I'm going to talk later in another video about my favorite song, we'll learn what it is, about the importance of the brass. And this is when we get probably the greatest sense of Valjean, the man. I mean, he brings true, authentic manhood to the story, not just because he's of the male sex, but he's a man.
Yes.
He's a dude. He's the boss, and you know it when he stands up and shows himself, and the way Alfie presents it here. And this is another part of his performance, but the orchestra and the supporting instrumentation and the music there is fantastic to me.
Yes.
The brass
Yes.
really just nails it.
Just everything feels beautifully on precision in pretty much any performance of this that you listen to. There's one part that I just especially like. I just think that part is soul-stirringly beautiful, so I just wanted to point it out. But the whole song is truly a great, wonderful composition by Claude Michel Schoenberg, as the entire show is. Alright, so now I want to dig into the lyrics a little bit. This is where I have a lot to say, because I've thought about this song a lot. Like I said, I think this song serves a very interesting purpose in the overall story. Something it does, like we said, it's a prayer. So I think it's very interesting that we get a chance to see a little more of the intimate side of Valjean's relationship with God, because we don't get to see that a whole lot throughout the rest of the show. For good reason, it's something that's difficult to depict when you have something that's very intimate and personal like that, but I really appreciate the show takes a moment to exhibit that a little bit more. So it's nice that Valjean starts off in a place of peace and in a place of trust, very much, because the first thing he said is like, God has always heard his prayers, and that's how he opens it. Then he gets into his petition, where we see actually he isn't just saving Marius out of obligation or just for Cosette. He seems to be kind of really on his side and not just being like, save him for Cosette's sake. Like saying, he's young, he's afraid. He seems to be putting himself in Marius's position and sympathizing with him much more than he would have done in the book.
Yeah, even the mention of where he sings, he's like, the son I might have known. I think at that point he might be saying, I hope he's like this son I might have known, because I can't stand him. And that can be a petition too, that you grow to love those people that you're going to have to deal with and be, part of their lives. I mean, what does that say? You can pick your friends.
Oh, you can't choose your family.
You can't choose your family?
Yeah.
Right, so he's going to be, not yet.
Yes.
But Cosette loves him, and
yeah.
It's like if he's going to be my son-in-law, he's going to be my son.
Yeah.
I want to, I'm asking your help, Lord, to make this work.
Yeah, that's something I think is kind of why Valjean would say that. Like, he's like the son I might have. Because I've seen people say, like, oh, that seems a bit of a stretch. He barely knows this kid. But I think Valjean is more thinking in the future of, like, if he marries Cosette, he's going to be like a son to me. And I think also he might be acknowledging how, since he is taking on this protective role in Marius's life, if only briefly, he is for a short time becoming like a son to him. And he's also, this part of the song here where he says he's like the son I might have known, he becomes a little more reflective than prayerful, because he's no longer talking to God directly, because he says, if God had granted me a son. rather than saying, if you had granted me a son. So I think he's, in the next part he goes on to, he reflects on like his age and how he's not going to be around forever. And he might start thinking, well, yeah, Cosette is going to need someone to take care of her, and if this is the guy that she wants, then I want him to be there for her, for her sake. Something else that I thought was interesting about when Valjean says, if God had granted me a son, I think we see a glimpse there of how Valjean might think for a second that he might actually really enjoy having a son. Because it's interesting that Valjean, his life obviously has been very difficult, and he kind of had his opportunity for a normal life taken away from him at a relatively young age. He never had the chance to, get married and have children of his own. And obviously he loves Cosette more than anything in the world. He would never trade her for anything. But there's probably still a part of him that might wish to have had a son that he could, pass his unique masculine knowledge onto. Like you said, Valjean is very much a man, and Cosette is very much a woman.
And it's interesting too that at least in the play, he's saying when he's in jail, he says, not in jail, but with the bishop, I think.
No, when he's talking to, when he says,
I stole some bread for my sister's son, something along those lines.
Well, he says my sister's child in the opening to Javert. Later, when he's telling Marius, he says he, meaning himself, Jean Valjean, stole some bread to save his sister's son.
Yeah, so there's that reference to a boy.
Yes.
His nephew. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's anything working.
No, I hadn't thought about that before. So yeah, that's definitely interesting. So yeah, I think Valjean is being a little more open-minded in this. Go ahead.
That's right. And there was the boy he stole or took the coin from.
Oh yes, in the book.
So maybe there's something of remorse he has about the way he couldn't quite help his nephew, and then he treated this boy, and now here's another young man.
That he could have the opportunity.
Maybe that's a motivation for him to help him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, does little Gervais exist within the universe of the musical? We don't know because we don't see him. But what I was gonna say is I feel like Valjean is being a lot more open-minded in this part of the song than we see him be in the book, where he's like I said, putting himself in Marius's shoes, accepting that he could come into his life as a sort of son figure to him, and being okay with that, which is nice to see. So right after this, Valjean kind of returns to his prayer, where he says, bring him peace, bring him joy, and where he says he is only a boy. There feels like a shift in the song to me. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I think the music, does crescendo there a little bit. And Valjean, obviously he's been on Marius' side this whole time, but there's something, he seems to get a little more protective there when he says he is only a boy. And there's something about how this line is performed which just always hits me, especially in the encore of the 25th anniversary when all four of Valjean sing at the same time. It hits different. Or I guess it's three because Alfie hadn't come in yet, but still, three of them sing it. It hits different, and I really like it.
He's only a boy.
And I think, as for why there seems to be a shift there, like I said, Valjean maybe reflecting on how he had such a hard life, so many things taken away from him at a similarly young age, and he doesn't want that to happen to Marius as well. And he might be seeing how, he's innocent, he doesn't deserve to be in this situation, because in the musical, Marius is there because he cares about the cause, but in the book, he did not care about the cause.
He went there for...
he went there to die.
That's right, he did.
In the book, he went there to die. He didn't care about
because Valjean was going to take Cosette to England, right?
He thought Cosette didn't love him anymore, and so he was going there to die. In the musical, he does care about the cause, but, so, I mean, whether or not you agree with the revolutionaries' cause aside, he is fighting for at least a generally good cause of, justice for the oppressed and all that. And he is so young that you have to wonder, how much does he really understand what he's fighting for? And he's also just in a very emotionally wrought position right now.
And you don't really know either in the play that he's a man of means. He's from a wealthy family.
Yeah.
Why would he give all that up to go fight for these guys when he could probably help them with material goods and supplies and things, if he really wanted to? But he goes there to die, like you said, in the book.
Yeah. So I think that's just an interesting shift that happens in the song there, because directly after this, Valjean seems to get much bolder in his prayer. He explicitly acknowledges how God has the capability to save Marius if he so wills, and he becomes a little more demanding, saying let him be, let him live. And then of course, Valjean, at the climax of the song, we had him saying, you know, if I have to die in order for this to happen, then he accepts that. He is 100% on board with this. He is completely willing to give his life for Marius if that is what's necessary. And I love that because it's just so perfectly showcases what a selfless character Valjean is. And it feels very uniquely triumphant. I think, like you mentioned, the brass that lends it that. Talk about his manlyhood, and it feels like Valjean reaches this kind of this pinnacle of self-giving where Marius in some ways is the person who he would see as his greatest threat, taking away his most precious, you know, not possession because he's not a possession, but the most precious person in his life, Cassette, you know, who he values more than anything else. He would give his life even for the man who would take that away from him. So even more than what he did for Javert, arguably, this is even more self-sacrificial, what he's saying right here.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, oh gosh, I wish I could think of the quote, but it's from the Bushido, which is the Japanese, kind of the Japanese ethos for their kind of being the...
Is there a code of honor?
The code of honor, yeah, like the way that the samurai would be the knights of the East, you know. And there's something they say about there's power in quiet or solitude or something. So in a strange way, while Valjean was silent all through the night of the book, and then he's singing the song in kind of a solitary moment, he's praying, but the song takes, like you said, a turn when he, after he sings, he is young, he's only a boy, he sings, you can take, you can give, and there's a very significant crescendo and lift with the music. Yeah. And that's where he really rises up in his prayer, and he almost shouts, you know. Yeah, he's been singing in
falsetto this whole time, now he's belting.
Yeah, you can let him be, let him live it. And then he kind of, it's like he shouts, if I die, let me die.
But let him live.
But let him live. And it reminds me of the movie Forrest Gump, when Captain Dan was shouting at God during the hurricane.
It's time for a showdown! You and me! I'm right here!
You can't win that argument. But so there's this rising up of his will, in a sense, to
kind of just do whatever it takes to save.
Yeah, to do whatever it takes to save Marius, even if he dies.
Yeah.
And it's really a surrender to God's providence.
Yes.
And that requires great strength, great humility, and that's why Valjean is a man's man. Because there's that power in quiet.
And in giving.
And there's great power in that, because it comes from yourself.
Then right after that beautiful triumphant declaration from Valjean, the song dies back down again. Valjean returns to his little more pleading state when he sings Let Him Live. And I think at the end he kind of just, he finds this place of peace, I think, as he sings the last part of the song, repeating Bring Him Home over and over again, where it's like, I think he's in a state where he's like, yes, he's showed his hand, if that makes sense. Like, he's said to God, I am completely willing to do whatever's necessary. Now it's in your hands, and I'm going to let you do what you have to do. This is my prayer. And that's kind of the end of it.
By the way, I said Captain Dan, it was Lieutenant Dan.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to you Forrest Gump fans.
to all the many Forrest Gump fans who watch my channel.
Right. But he repeats, bring him home, bring him home, bring him home. That's that kind of surrender. And even as much as he may have escaped into the sewers in kind of a panic, just to get away from the fighting, you have to know that the entire time he was passing through the sewers, you know, with this seeming corpse, even though he's still alive, he's the one bringing him home.
Yes, and I think the show acknowledges that by the fact that during the part where Valjean drags Marius into the sewers, an instrumental version of this song is playing.
So it's funny how oftentimes when we pray, you know, be careful what you ask for. So God clearly said, yes, I'll bring him home and you will help.
Yes.
You will do it. Good idea.
Yes. So yeah, that's about all we had to say about the lyrics. Now finally I want to talk about the various different performances of this song, because there's actually a little more room for interpretation in this song than you might think, especially around the you can take, you can give area. Because I think arguably the majority of actors, when you watch performances of the song, they bring a lot of like anger to that part. We kind of talked about this earlier. Some of them, like I think I've seen Ramin Karimloo do this, where they'll even like point their fingers upward accusingly. And
yeah, that's the Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, exactly. And it has very much this feel of like, I know you can do this, so why don't you do it already? Which I think it's a perfectly valid interpretation. I think it's one that people find very relatable, because pretty much all of us have been in some situation where it seems like God isn't listening to our prayers, and so you can feel that anger towards him. But I personally prefer a somewhat different interpretation. Like, for instance, of course, you know this is coming, Alfie Boe in the 25th anniversary concert. I absolutely love how he performs this song, because I think he brings such a spirit of trust and joy to it, and he feels much less demanding or accusatory. It feels very peaceful and very humble, like you were saying before. Because when he gets to the you can take, you can give, it feels less like a why don't you do this already, more of a I know you can do this, and I trust that you will if you are going to. And directly afterwards, once you get to the if I die, let me die, I think most actors will also carry their anger into that part of it, where it's sort of like, oh, do I have to die for this? Well, fine, I'll die for it. Whereas I think when Alfie does it, he even like spreads his arms out in a very reminiscent...
Cruciform.
Yeah, very much. And it just feels like, yeah, if this is what has to happen, then I'm okay with it.
I think there was a little bit as he sings it, and I can't comment on all the other great performances and their expressions and all that, but there's just a slight hint of if I die, let me die, and he might kind of shake his head, like you might kind of flinch when somebody gives you a jolt.
Yeah.
But that's as far as he goes with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's almost as though he's reacting to what he's saying, instead of using his emotions to drive the song.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost a little reaction to getting poked by it. He poked himself. Yeah. You know.
He's kind of realizing
emotionally
what he's saying.
Yeah.
So I just think that more very humble, subservient attitude that Alfie brings to it is very in character for Valjean, because I don't see Valjean as the kind to ever feel really angry towards God. He always seems to have a very great sense of trust in him and in his grace. And I feel like within the book, at least, I could be forgetting, we never really see any sort of anger like that. He's just accepting, and he's at peace with this decision. It's interesting to me because, so Colm Wilkinson's performance was the first one that I ever watched, because I saw the 10th anniversary first, and I think Colm does have a less angry you can take, you can give, but he does bring a little more belligerence into the if I die, let me die, because he does like this with his hands, and it's awesome. It gives me chills every time.
If I die,
but I personally, I just prefer Alfie's performance more. Obviously, you can choose any performance you like. They're all great. They all bring something different to it. This is just something that speaks to me personally. Something else like that Colm Wilkinson does is at the end of the song, when he is holding the note for 18 seconds, because he can do that, he does this with his hands, and he always closes them at the end, which adds a nice little prayerful touch to it that I appreciate. There was one actor I saw once, I do not remember his name, I feel very bad, but he actually did the sign of the cross at the end of the song, which was very nice to see.
It's like Norman Lewis did at the end of his
it wasn't quite at the end of
Stars,
but he did do it in there. But it's nice to see it here, because Valjean is a better Christian than Javert. He understands what he's saying more. I've really yet to see a bad performance of the song outside of one, but we don't need to talk about it.
Not on stage.
Not on stage.
Yeah, there's no bad performances on stage.
Alright, well, I think that is all we have for today, talking about the song. As you can see, I love it very much. We both love it very much. And if you have any thoughts that you would like to share, any performances that you think are especially standout, whoever your favorite Valjean is, please share them with us in the comments. I would very much like to read it. And I think our next video is going to be about... Who am I? I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. Get excited for that one. It's going to be very, very interesting. A lot to dive into there. He has two of Valjean's solos right next to each other because they're some of the greatest parts of the show, and a great chance for the tenors to show off their vocal capabilities. But yeah, that's all we have for today. Thank you, as always, for watching, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.